Hello, everybody, and welcome back for the final segment of the 2022 UK Nigeria Tech Summit. And I cannot believe we're coming into the final quarter of this two-day event. It literally only felt like yesterday we were kicking off in the morning talking about startup skills and talent. And that yesterday I was in a position introducing you to our amazing panels for investment. And what a fantastic second half of the program we've had this morning. We were looking at ecosystem development, building those bridges between the UK and Nigeria. And I think the biggest takeaway I took from this morning, and it was similar to what we heard yesterday afternoon with international investors accessing opportunities on the continent, is actually how harmonious all these international organizations, communities, and individuals are when it comes to this idea of collaboration and this. Actually, we have a Nigerian tech ecosystem, we have a UK ecosystem, but they are so heavily interlinked in the people that operate across them. It actually is one big ecosystem. And so I'm very, very excited to see the conversations that are stemming out of this. I'm getting a lot of messages via Twitter, via WhatsApp, people talking about, oh, I heard this in this session, and actually we're doing this, can we connect that person? I've got this long list of people I need to start connecting the dots with. And that's what really this UK Nigeria Tech Summit is about, and what the UK Nigeria Tech Hub is all about. It's about running initiatives, putting together rooms of great people where we can connect and build opportunities together and share that with our communities and our ecosystem as a whole. So we've got our final couple sessions before we conclude this afternoon, and I'm so excited for what we have in store for you this afternoon. The theme and topic for this afternoon has been all about governance and policy. And the reason we went with that is there is a lot of movement happening right now in Nigeria around governance and policy, and trying to really level up the support that the public sector and government gives to entrepreneurs, not just here in Nigeria, but Pan-Africa. And we're seeing a lot of change happening across the continent. And so before we get into all of our sessions, I would just like to say to everybody, if you are on Hopin, make sure that you are engaging with us in the chat bar. If you look on your right-hand side, you should see event and stage. Click on stage, and that will take you to the chat function. Please do talk in there, discuss the topics that come up. But also as well, you'll see there's a poll section where we're asking you regularly to get some input and data. It's really important to help us form the opinions around these conversations and indeed what we might do in the future. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A. And then finally, of course, as well, if you want to go beyond that to social media, whether that's on LinkedIn, whether that's on Twitter, and particularly Twitter, where we've got a lot of chatter going on, we're posting about the sessions, use the hashtag UKNG Tech Summit to make sure yours is tracked and followed within that. But once again, thank you all for joining us. Now, before we get into our two final panels of the day, and I'll talk about them a bit, we have a fantastic guest speaker joining us to kick off with our final keynote of the summit. Somebody that has been heavily involved, not just in the entrepreneurial and startup ecosystem, but really been that conduit to the Nigerian government. Ife Adebayo is the Special Assistant on Innovation Entrepreneurship to the Nigerian Vice President of Nigerian Government Vice President Office. And he is going to share a couple words with us around the state of play here in Nigeria, and indeed his experiences across the ecosystem. So Ife, I'll welcome you to the stage, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Anthony, and it's good to be here to engage and speak with the ecosystem across Nigeria and the United Kingdom. And I think one of the most beautiful things about Nigeria's tech ecosystem at the moment is in the fact that there are endless. It's an ecosystem that has endless potentials and opportunities, which is why you will observe that in spite of the fact that Nigeria has had 2 recessions in the last 6 years, and also was also not immune from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, we still have an ecosystem that has consistently shown that it is resilient. We have an ecosystem that has been able to churn out 6 unicorns in the last few years. And when you look at the figures, as of 2017, the tech investments that came into Nigeria were just about $114 million. In 2018, this rose to about $348 million. But as of 2021, we had about $1.8 billion. So when you look at the growth rate between 2017 and 2021 for Nigeria, you will see that there's been a 99% increase in investments into the ecosystem. But when you layer that with what is happening in Africa, you see that there's also been growth in Africa, but it's been just slightly lower. And Nigeria has consistently accounted for between 20 to 35% of tech funding that comes into Africa, which shows you that this is a market that is resilient. This is a market that has continued to show that it is able to grow and it is able to develop. One key thing that you will also note is that besides the fact that we've had these unicorns and we keep hearing of raises day in, day out by Nigerian founders, you see that we also have an ecosystem now that is becoming more responsive to itself. So you have former founders who are now becoming investors, former founders putting money into the ecosystem and also supporting other founders. You have former employees of startups also moving out and setting up their own startups. You have persons who were working in innovation hubs and tech hubs, while also stepping out and are now becoming founders themselves and are looking at where are the pain points in the country, where are the places and the spaces where there is opportunity that we can tap into and become part of the process that takes Africa to the next level. But then to now speak about what I think we should now look forward to as we're moving on. I think startups must now begin to look at solving big problems. So what are the key and core issues in agri, and what is the role that technology can play in solving these problems? What are the key issues around food security? We live in a time when very soon the amount of arable land you have is not what is going to be important anymore, but what is your yield per hectare? How much can you deliver safely to people without using certain pesticides and all of that? So how do we, as a tech community, come together to look at what these issues are and what are the kind of partnerships that we can draw with people who have done this in other climes like the United Kingdom, and how can we collaborate and work together to find solutions to issues around healthcare? How do we know, for example, what are the various kinds of value add that can be given to African herbs that can find solutions and treatments to certain diseases across the world? How can Africa start to contribute meaningfully within these spaces in healthcare, in security, in education, in logistics and transportation, in commerce, in manufacturing? What is the role that the tech community can play in coming up with solutions? And I'll give examples. When you look at what a lot of the agri tech companies in Nigeria are doing, right? They raise funds. They then empower those who are on the ground doing the hard work to be able to do this hard work in the right way, provide them with the right seedlings, with the right information, with the right advice, with the right fertilizers, and then help them to also get access to buyers for their products. It's the same thing in healthcare. When you look at what the likes of Life Bank are doing in Nigeria, where they're using drones and other means of getting life-saving medical needs, medical resources to people who really need it. And when you also look at the role things like this can play, even in areas of Nigeria where we have insurgency, for example, how can we get things that are needed, medical resources that are needed to the people in the most difficult to reach places? What is the role of commerce? We have the southeast of Nigeria as the hub of commerce and manufacturing. What role can technology play to ensure that we're able to, as a country, position ourselves for opportunities to sell to the world the way China does? But beyond an opportunity to sell to the world, what are the logistics and what are the logistics, communications, and transportation barriers? And how can we build solutions that find the answer to these? And also, how can we engage with the United Kingdom and other partners in Europe to find the right kind of standards? Make sure that we're meeting the global standards required of products. Make sure that in the manufacturing process, We're ensuring that all human rights issues are covered. These difficult things that solve local and international problems, I think, are things that the tech sector must begin to look into. One final thing that I think that the ecosystem must do is government engagement. It is becoming very critical that this ecosystem, as it grows bigger, must actively begin to have government engagement, public sector engagement experts, either on their payroll or as a form of consultancy. Because what you find is there is a lot of mismatch between what the ecosystem is doing and the ability of government regulation, policy making, and legislation to catch up. So engagement, understanding each other, speaking to each other is one other point that I think will be really important. And on the government end, just to quickly speak on some of the things that the government is doing, we're working with African Development Bank to raise $500 million for this ecosystem. $170 million of this has already been approved by the African Development Bank. The Islamic Development Bank is in the process of getting its on board approval for $70 million. And the French Development Agency has gotten its on board approval for $116 million. Now, what is this fund going to be utilized for? It will be used to support the ecosystem on skills. How can Nigeria become the talent pool of the world for technology skills? We will support the ecosystem on infrastructure. How can we provide catalytic infrastructure to support what is going on? And also we support the ecosystem on government engagement and policy making. How can we bridge the gap between what the ecosystem is doing and what government is doing? And finally, we also support with investment. The chunk of the funds will actually be going into VC funding. So we're going to have about $130 million, which will go into VC funding, managed by a private sector fund manager. And there will be about $110 million in debt financing that will also be available for the ecosystem. To round up, do I think more needs to be done? Definitely. There's a lot more that needs to be done. I think the ecosystem and government must continue to engage. The federal government in 2018 set up the Technology and Creativity Advisory Group, which is made up of persons from the private sector and the public sector, to be able to sit down and engage on the issues that are affecting the ecosystem and how we can solve those issues, how we can come up with solutions, practical solutions to those issues. So we need to continue to engage on that. An example of how that has been working is Oswald Bobadia, the SSC on Digital Transformation to the President, has been leading engagements with the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy on the Nigeria Startup Bill. This Startup Bill is one of the key legislation that we know is going to really support this ecosystem and provide comfort for players in the ecosystem. It has been passed by the Federal Executive Council, chaired by Mr. President himself, and it is currently at the National Assembly and undergoing the relevant processes to become law. Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to continue to have conversations and engagements like this. I look forward to continue to work with the ecosystem, and we look forward to better relationships, to strengthen our relationships with the ecosystem in the UK. Thank you.